The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. Still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Hawaiian volcano tracker update today, Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. There's not a whole bunch of news today, just one linked piece of news, but it's very impactful, and it's the same story we've been talking about for a few days, Dane. Another breakout from the lava channel upslope that's playing in a screen here between us. And as a consequence, it appears that since 6 o'clock this morning, the last 12 hours, there's been no advance of the flow front towards the highway, according to the USGS reports. So, to me, I'm calling that the flow is stalled there at the front. It may unstall potentially, but thus far, for 12 hours, it appears stalled and not moving.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's really interesting to see it reset again. We saw one the other night, 3 nights ago. And now we're seeing another big one upslope and breaking out of the channel and making a new channel that runs down parallel to the old one. And then eventually is going to run into that giant, 1 mile wide flow front, that giant blob of a.k.a. that's sitting in the flats down below the slope. So every one of those resets really does dramatically impact the advancement of that flow front. Well, not dramatically, but relatively significantly, right? Every time it does it, it's important. And to see another one, that's good.
Yeah, and this wasn't just like any of the others we saw. This was the actual main channel that was feeding that flow is the one that got diverted. So rather than any of these other branches upslope that maybe took away a little bit of lava here, a little bit of lava there, we took away most of the lava with that last outbreak that seems to have occurred just after we stopped broadcasting yesterday. So almost 24 hours ago is when that actually first seems to have jumped the banks or broken the levee, or exactly what happened is hard to tell from this distance on a webcam. But in any case, started that new flow, and that main channel that's leading up to the current a.a. front is not really being fed fresh lava, right? There's still a channel there. It's still downhill a long ways, and it can probably spread a little bit longer just by gravity. Interesting that we heard from our interview today with Dr. Ken Han from USGS and Mayor Roth, that flow front, what did he say, 30 to 40 feet thick in the middle is what they've figured out. So thicker in the middle and then 20 feet at the edges, more or less, right? So kind of like a big pancake. And so it could flatten and spread out a little bit more, though, it's probably fairly settled, as you guys have seen. That flow has got a dense core, and it's fairly solid on the bottom and on the top. So it's pretty sticky and viscous already. So it will settle a little bit, but maybe not too much, right, is the long and short of it. So that's the paired piece of news, the channel outbreak and the flow front stalling. That's really most of what we have to share with you guys today. We'll go through the usual routine of sharing what we have and the videos and some of the signals and all that. Anything else, Dean, before we jump into it?
Well, I think that's about it for now. If anybody does have questions, make sure to drop those in the chat, and we'll try and get to them in the question and answer segment a little later.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and Dan will be leading the discussion in the chat as well. Thanks for that. All right, so here we are. Let's put that image big on the screen here for you guys, and you see there's that Fissure 3 vent at the very top, and there's that split that we've been calling the braid for a while, even though it's really two different channels that have come apart and then bounced back together and eventually merged way down slope. So I'm showing 3 different nights here. And the most recent night is this one that just flashed on, and maybe let me try to pause it right there. So we have a breakout occurring from right in here, and the old channel, you see it a little bit still glowing right there, but most of that flow is now coming out and around. And this is a nighttime view, so you can't really see exactly what's happening there, but this is right up against the edge of that old flow. And actually the one on this right side, the western side, is also up against the edge of that flow. So it really seems to have split. These are essentially the 2 flow fronts as of this image last night. And you can see the clouds then come in, and we can't really see too much more on that. So I'll come back to this, but that's the main story there. Let me show what else we have from the USGS, and we have a couple images. There's this one, which, let me zoom it out here, was taken this morning during an overflight. So it might be a little hard. I'm going to zoom it in so you can see a little better. There is that Fissure 3 up there, and the lava channel coming down like this. You see it traced like that, and it's coming into here. And somewhere in a range of in here, it appears, maybe that's the spot right there. It seems to be spilling out from that main channel. There is a main channel coming over here. You see that line? Seems to be spilling out, and is now feeding another a.a. flow that is right up against the flow field on the right side here, that west side, and is starting to spread the flow field further to the east onto this lighter colored piece of ground over here. So that's the zoomed out view. There is an actual flow front of that, and you can see it was starting to diverge a little bit from the old pathway a little bit there, but still within this lava flow field here. And that's the zoomed out view, and there's one more which is slightly more zoomed in. And there it is. And very similar view from the helicopter there. So that's what that looks like. Looked like this morning. Some of the live cams. Here is the live cam looking from the UH 2.2 meter telescope. So it's going to zoom in. I was about to zoom in, but looks like it's zooming into the fissure there. So we saw a little bit of how that lava flow was still drizzling down the slopes, not in that main channel there. So we'll come back to the view later. But let's cycle through the USGS, and USGS live feed has had a few issues today. Let's see if it's up at the moment. But this has been great that they kept it going for so long. Looks like it's not up presently, but they've been obviously trying hard. We had a warning from USGS and Ken that they filled the parking meter as much as they could with the data, and they were just going to see what happened. And kept it going for a good while, but it seems like something's happening now. So we'll come back and check it tomorrow. But we can come to the text updates. So from this morning, at just before 9 a.m., the eruption continued. The flow was on a flat ground, and the new information essentially, as of 6 a.m. today, December 7th, the flow was 1.8 miles from the a.k.a. Saddle Road. So yesterday we said 1.5. That was the number that the county said it was approaching 1.5, and this is the actual real number. I have to discount that point from yesterday. It's actually 1.8 today, this morning as of 6 a.m. And then they say, the flow advanced only a small distance since midnight, possibly due to a significant breakout removing lava from the channel about 2.8 miles behind the tip of the main flow on the east side. That's what we're just looking at. Lava flow remains active and is continuously supplied from the Fissure 3 vent. They have installed a new webcam, which we'll show you guys in a bit. New webcam, the M9 camera is now up. And then all the usual verbiage here. Advanced rates may be variable, they can spread out, inflate, different lobes, breakouts may occur if lava channels get blocked upslope. All of that is there, and still difficult to estimate when or if the flow will impact the highway. Circle back to that. That is a question many people have, but jumping to complete the update sequence for today, 4:23 p.m. They say, lava flow has advanced very little since 6 a.m. this morning, when it was about 1.8 miles from the Saddle Road. The flow advance is possibly slowed due to the significant breakout removing lava from the channel, about 2.8 miles behind the tip of the main flow on the east side. The main flow is advanced at an average rate slower than 20 feet, 6 meters per hour during a 24-hour period prior to this morning. Prior to this morning, right? Because as of this morning, very little. Flow remains active and webcam and all that. So all the same warnings again, and not sure what's going on here. We'll just move on. So the most recent map. Come on, map. What's going on with my browser here? Eruption. All of a sudden, oh, there we go. There's a map. Okay. So there's a December 7th, 7 a.m. map, and very little change since that point in time. So really, let's zoom in here to the area of interest. All right. So there is an actual flow front. There's a red, darker red, showing the expansion of the flow field since yesterday, right there. But more significant is these areas that are further upslope, and these are breakouts that we saw from both sides here of the channel. Right, so there is that main braid. You see this yellow line that was indicating that continuous channel connected all the way to here. Now is actually feeding that one flow that's along this edge that way. And that second one must have occurred somewhere right in here, flowing off in that direction like that. The USGS map just has a little bit of the red lines. If we look at the county map, they actually, in addition to all the regular text that we've summarized here, actually label these breakouts to make it a little easier for people to understand where they actually are. That's the red lines there and there. But props once again to Kit Tincher, who has taken the aerial photographs and tried to extrapolate and map out as of the photograph rather than as of that previous flight in that map, where that flow may actually be and where it's advanced. So here is what he's come up with. He says about a quarter mile based on his estimate there that it's come off, and there you can see that little bit of diversion right there, a little gap in the area right in there. So that is what it looks like, and hasn't gone very far. It's not like it's going to run from this point anywhere that different. If you look at the descent lines, essentially pulls it back into the same zone like that if that were to become that main front. However, as we just saw, not only is it splitting down in the lower parts, but it's also splitting in the upper parts, and that upper part is what's robbing this entire system, including this branch, other branches down here. Maybe not this one here in particular, but this one we mentioned yesterday on this east side, robbing those ones of lava as well. So typically what's happening is what we saw in a picture yesterday of having lava boats in the channel, and lava boats are collecting and it causing blockages, and those blockages then can cause the lava to overflow, or it could also get flushed out, right? So what that means is that lava supply to the front is no longer as steady as it used to be. It's going to come, if there's a blockage that gets cleared, you're going to have a big surge. So all the lava is going to flush down all at one time, and this come in. It might cause overflows in some areas, and then it would cause a front to surge forward as well. But if any of those previous breakouts in the back upper part of the channel divert the lava that from continuing in that direction, then you can start a new branch of the flow, and that's the pattern we're seeing here. And this is similar to what Kit was talking about on his map yesterday from the 1984 flows, this one, where I didn't mention this explicitly yesterday, but now this is as good a time as any. When that flow came from Maunaloa in 1984, and it's a different location altogether, but let's look at the pattern rather than that. The first flows spread out in the upslopes, and the main channel was this orange one here, right? But it actually, after traveling all this distance down to here, broke back open on the upslope and traveled in a parallel path about just as far. And then when it got to about that length of distance, it broke back upslope again and traveled a little bit further from that same spot. And so it seemed to have certain spots where it get blocked, and that's where it would overflow. And that overall prevents the flow from, imagine if in 84, if that darker orange flow was on the tip of this lighter orange flow, that would have gotten all the way into Hilo. But because the flow split itself and covered more ground in the same elevations there, that prevented the flow from actually advancing as far. And that's the pattern we've been trying to describe for a while. Good to see the example of 84 here. And that may well be what we're seeing here. Go back to today's map. We might be seeing here this flow splitting and causing other branches here that spreads it out, cover more of an area side to side than it has so far, even though this front is fanned out to about a mile width, as we heard Dr. Han mention earlier today. So those are the maps. Looking at some of the webcams, I thought I would show first, this is the load here. This is the MK2 camera from yesterday through the night. You can see there, that's where we took these two flows advancing before the clouds come in. So from the top of the mountain, you still have good views of the fissure and upper channel, but not as much from the lower part. And from lower down on the mountain, really depends exactly where you are for what point of view you actually get. Didn't see a whole lot in the webcams there. So weather conditions have been at times better, still variable, and at times you can see it's still getting whiteout conditions there. So definitely improved, but definitely not 100% clear either, just to make sure we are sharing realistic expectations. So once again, there's this video of the actual breakouts occurring and then flowing down a hill here, and there's two flow fronts there and there, and that's really the money shot for today. The new camera they mentioned in their update is the M9. Here is what it looks like, totally whited out, but it's looking at that flow front from a slightly different direction, as you saw in that earlier image there. But here in a daytime view, you can see a little bit more. There is a flow right in there, and you see a whole bunch of and a little bit of pohoiho here on the side. It's a view from slightly further west, looking more in a southeast direction, maybe something like that. Best I can tell so far. And it looks like you see the old Saddle Road down here, and you see some cars parking in this area and driving by here. Get the viewing of the lava. So in case you're wondering what the viewing area is in the distance, that's about where. It's an example here, people parking somewhere around here and be able to look across and see the flow over there.
This is also the best new camera for people to check the current conditions for viewing before heading up the saddle as well. Like some of the others, it was kind of hard to tell exactly what the conditions would be like from the ground, but this one adds a really good perspective.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, if you're planning to go up there, a word of advice is the weather can be variable at any point in time, and if you want to make sure you see it, you might have to wait until the weather is more depending on when you arrive and what the weather's doing, and the bigger window of time you have, the more chance you have to see it. So in that case, just be prepared for the time it takes to get up there and the traffic you might encounter and the weather and the cold temperatures if you're going to stay for a while at night, especially. Make sure you're supplied to stay warm and have enough energy and all of that. Of course, be careful if it's going to be raining up there on the road. This is something we've seen Hawaii County mention a couple of times. Be careful of the road up there. And while we're talking about viewing, Dane, it's probably worth just recapping a little bit of what we heard Mayor Roth talk about today. People walking out there, having impacts in both the condition of the landscape as far as garbage and all of that, as far as safety when it comes time to potentially see a change in the flow or, consider a closure of the saddle, although I still have personal doubts that it's going to come to that. But if that's the case and everyone's all spread out, it makes it harder, and as a result, it may end up having to close some parts of the viewing or close some of the access there.
Right. And that would be a shame, because really it's such a gift just to have this viewing area available for anybody that wants to go up there and check it out for a little while, as long as you can get the conditions right. And that's really something we've asked for. We didn't have that in 2018. We didn't have that in 2014. Right. It's been a while since something like this existed. I mean, usually it would have to be in the park for you to have viewing, and this is a rare opportunity for people to go out and get that possibly once in a lifetime opportunity to view the lava like this.
For sure, yeah. So, yeah, definitely everyone do your part, and once again, it comes down to community to make sure that we're moving together in the right direction, right? And so you see those guys who are not part of the community doing not part of the community things, and you can feel free to let them know. Okay, so let's look at some other webcams here before we on a Maunaloa side here. Give this a reload, because this is view from earlier in an M8, and maybe before I reload it, just show you some of the views from a few hours ago. There's clearer up above the cloud layer. You see the cloud layer and the fissures right above that. So depending on how high up you are, you may be able to see that. M6, M4, and K2, K. There's the run through the cameras. Let me load them and let's just give a refresh in the conditions. Go back in the opposite direction. There's the MK, so you can see the flow from up on Mauna Kea. And there is a MK2, and pause a little longer so you can really see that it looks like this flow is a mess. It's really spreading out all over the place, right? It seems like that branch that we saw over here seems to have split again. Other little branches, and these two are coming together again. So it's definitely not as efficient putting lava down to the flow front as the long and short of it, as we've been saying for days and days now. So that's the MK2, and scrolling back up, looks dark from M7. Looks like you actually can see a little bit of glow from Volcano tonight, coming from Maunaloa direction, and maybe just marginally from Kilauea. We'll check in on that in a few minutes here. And otherwise, there still clear views further up on the mountain. And there's an M8, so still going strong. Similar fountain heights relative to the going. No visible change. Okay, so there are a set of photographs released today, which is views of the vent, views of that breakout that we mentioned, a video I'll play you in just a minute here, the VOG that's being emitted, and you can see how it's, in this particular image, it's emitting from the vent and then being blown by the winds back towards ground level or over the ridge here. Seeing the VOG, how it travels around, we'll cover VOG a little bit more, and then a couple of images of the lava channel here, so let's talk about those, but first let's play you this movie that was released, another movie of the lava channel flowing, and this one, you can see, looks like hoi hoi ropes on the surface right up here, so once again we're near the vent, and likely this is that bubblier lava, right? So as it moves further down the channel and releases some of its gas and grows more crystals, besides the fact that lava that's coming out of the vent itself has been growing crystals for the last 10 days since the eruption began, right? That's one part that's a little bit convoluted in there, but you have crystals growing in a flow going down the slope, which are probably smaller than the ones that have been growing for the last 10 days, even in a fissure underground. And the reason is once the ground pops open, you start releasing all that gas and pressure, then you can start forming those reactions where the crystals can grow. So the lava coming out of the vent itself could be more crystal rich at some point. We heard Dr. Han mention that today as well. And typically that means that the further away you get from the vent, the more likely your flow turns into from having all those things that make it more viscous and make it flow in a way that rips itself apart more than the smoother pahoehoe. So that's another view of that channel move-in, and bring up this one image of that still frame just to note once again, if you haven't been following, that's moving at 26 to 36 feet per second. That's 8.2 to 11 meters per second, which we've calculated as in the range of 17 to 22, 23 miles an hour. And that's just an upper section, and obviously the flow front is miles and miles away. The last measuring we had of that flow length before it stalled out, it was somewhere in a range of 10.5 miles-ish, something like that. So it's a long way for lava to flow to lose its gas and to start getting sticky and turn from one smoother, more fluid kind to a slightly less fluid, stickier, crumblier kind there. So that's what we'll cover for the images today. We do have another set of images from the satellite on Twitter. This is from Iban Ameztoy at @I_Ameztoy, and sharing very high resolution video of Maunaloa from Airbus space. And so I can zoom this in a little bit. There you get some of these views. This is just very high resolution image from December 1st. So you can see as he's panning around here, different aspects of the flow field captured in high resolution that day. So that was his little preview, and we have another longer version, thanks to Dane, who put this together today. So there is coming down on Fissure 3, and we had 2 channels, but this is the main channel we're following down on December 1st. We're looking through a lot of that fog, so that's why it looks a little bit washed out here. It's because we're looking through that emission cloud. You see several of those channel splits, braids, it comes back together. You see the landscape of old lava flows that it's flowing across from very similar events happening in the past as well. Here we come to another braid with a little island between, that mid-upper one around the cone, and then further at the very bottom is where we actually start to see a Maunaloa Observatory Road coming on the right there. So there's that road, a flow from the Northeast Rift, and this image goes all the way up to the caldera there. So I thought I'd come into the Airbus site here just briefly, and let's see if I can get this to load, and just point out a couple of things that are cool for you to go and explore, kind of starting points. Let's try to get it to reload. And if this one doesn't, then I'll just move on, but oh, there it is. So, okay, there's that wide image, and there's that road, and the Fissure 3 event right in here. So let me zoom in and pan down to show you guys Fissure 4, which was still active December 1st. And there's that crack in the ground with the flow coming out of it right there. I wonder if I can go in bigger for you guys to see. There's that crack from Fissure 4. By this point, was only flowing to the northeast. But if I zoom it out, you can see a little bit of that pattern of the flow that came off to the southeast as well. I want to pan it up from Fissure 3 here, and we'll look in the shadow of this massive cloud of gas. And look at the outside edges here. You see some of the flows from those Fissures 1 and 2 area that started flowing down the hill there and across Observatory Road, an area more or less in there. It appears, if you zoom into here, in the shadow of that giant gas cloud, it appears to still be something glowing in there. This might be one of these fissures that still has incandescence in it, or maybe it's possibly a small flow or something, but curiosity there. Looks like it's very near the source of the fissure for those flows, so it might just be a big glowing crack. The lava's flowing underneath there still. And moving further up the hill, we come to the edge of Mokuaweo'aweo caldera of Maunaloa, Summit Caldera, and zoom it in right in here. We see some of this cracks that have a bunch of sulfur on them. You can actually see this lighter colored gray as a lava that flowed out here. So there's this part of this upper section that you can see is between there and there. Flow that ran in that fairly skinny area downhill, and then you kind of lose it. It splits around this cone up down in here and heads off a little bit this direction before it stops. But otherwise, most of the flow from those other fissures is covered behind a cloud. Panning it back up to the caldera. You can see there's the outer edge of the caldera, and this is that North Bay, North Pit, however you think of it. And it seems like that fissure continues across into here. And the edge of the flow is going to be something like that. You actually can see the summit trail right here getting cut off and covered by lava. And then picks back up in here. So lava covering this area of that trail into that North Bay area. And that fissure continues over here. There's more flow all the way down to within the caldera itself. There's a spot even way up here. If you zoom way in, looks like it might be glowing red right in there from one of these flows. And we only get this eastern scallop of the caldera here. We don't get to see as much off to the other side, but there is that zone of fissures somewhere likely in there. It looks like it might still be emitting some heat or steam or something at the time of this photograph. It's hard to tell exactly. That's just a cloud or the fog blowing across, or somewhere in here is that fissure. And that's what we can see here. And since I just like this area so much, I'll just zoom in here to some of these old fissures that cut across the caldera wall and dribbled into the crater here. There's some other cool stuff to look around. You can find quite a lot of stuff there. Maybe if I found the right spot somewhere in here, if you zoom it way in, you might actually be able to find some of these webcam boxes from USGS. I don't think I found it successfully this time. But really cool. So you can check that out from the Airbus site, and you can download the image if you like, or just use this online browser to zoom way into this high-res image. So really cool stuff there. So speaking of all this VOG covering the image, let's look at the VOG forecast today. Here is from VMAP, from the UH system. And our two emission sources are Kilauea and Maunaloa. Kilauea has been down quite a bit. Let's see what they have put in here. 670 tons per day as their measurement, but I think the last one was even lower in the 300s. It's really Maunaloa putting out the majority of emissions, and the weather is blowing them all around and affecting them and perhaps interacting with that VOG. And for the most part, the forecast seems to be like it's blowing more towards this Kona side here. So we actually have, this is the, I think I have SO2 up here, which is that pure form of the gas, but as it flies through the air and reacts, it might turn into more particulates, the aerosols, and so you can click the SO4 button too if you want to have more of an indication of that. And sometimes that may matter. We look at the DOH state map, and let's see if it'll load any data. No, let's reload it again. This is measuring both SO2 and PM 2.5. It's giving a combined signal, but it's giving greens for everywhere here. You actually can click them different. There's the SO2 sites and there is a PM 2.5 sites, but in either case, it's green everywhere. However, if we go to purple air, looks like I got my data points, but not my base map. This is the Kona coast right in here that you see with all these yellows all through there. So, should reload button. Something has been going off my browser since we started today. There it is. There's a map. There's the Kona coast showing all those PM 2.5. These are 10-minute intervals that they're measuring, so maybe that's why they're picking this up a little bit better. So certainly some effect there on the Kona side, as well as in the saddle Dane. Anything you want to share about the saddle conditions that we've heard?
Yeah, we've got several reports now. We got one just in chat right now from Jan Wood, says Kona had fog today, enough to make a bad taste in my mouth. We also had some reports up on Saddle Road of foggy conditions. And just take this opportunity to remind you, we are doing a survey about fog, and this will help with detection and forecasting and all that kind of stuff. Basically, it's been 38 years since we had a real run on Maunaloa. A lot of the technology didn't exist back then, so now it's time to tune it in a real-world circumstance, and we don't know if it's not performing really well unless people say it's not performing well and give us some data points. So that's what this survey is. And go ahead and drop it in the chats right now. And again, we're just trying to collect data points. We're working with Evgenia Alieninskaya, and going to be hopefully turning this into something that researchers can use later and make some refinements to the VOG modeling and all the different aspects of it.
Yeah, put it this way: if all you ever saw was the DOH site and all their data, you think everything was fine. There was nothing to worry about, right? So if you look at just a purple air, but that's citizen science, then you get a little bit different picture. So this could be the tipping point, right? The data set that really shows the scientists what's going on the ground. Yeah, so really, really important stuff there.
And it really came from us getting reports from guys on the ground and be like, oh, it's foggy here, and this is where I'm locating at this mile marker. And we check the sensors, and nothing shows up. So there's some weird things at play, and they've taken the same exact survey, well, a little different, but same survey in Iceland, and used it to improve their monitoring. So we're trying to duplicate their efforts.
Yeah, the idea is that the monitors show what people are actually experiencing, right? So that can be documented and acted upon for sure. So in a national park is the other place people might come across bad air quality, but here is a national park air quality site. Everything's been in the green all day today. So yesterday we had a couple little spikes, but not so today. All good there, and people are perhaps going to Kilauea to see if they can get any view of the glow there, right? And pattern on Kilauea, I won't go into as much detail as yesterday, but the crusting over and overturning of the lava lake continues. And there's the F1 camera. Let me reload this and see what it looks like now, but you can see it actually had a couple brighter spots. It still does. A couple brighter spots of the lava coming out and flowing onto that crusted surface. So all this part is all flat in here, and all these little flows are flowing on top of that, and they're almost making little pahoi flows that are kind of bumpy and changing the texture of the flow. So we'll see that here in a few seconds. But first, let's look at the KW camera. Here is from a little bit earlier. Actually, this is live here, so there is what's glowing to the naked eye. A little bit of that west vent pond, and a little bit of the surface of the lake itself, although clearly just glow from the cracks and not from the entire surface. Which is a lot less, obviously, there. So here it is for the last 24 hours. You can see it was a little bit more glowy last night. And then during the day, not a whole lot visible. You see a lot of the fumes still coming out and weather conditions being challenging. And there you go. So it's still glowing a little bit, especially over hour to hour. But overall activity still seems reduced quite a bit. And confirms this potential connection between Kilauea and Maunaloa, that when Maunaloa erupts, it can squeeze Kilauea's shallow system closed, right? So yeah, mentioned that in our interview, and that's interesting. Here is a V1 camera, and we showed this aspect of the wall collapse yesterday, but here are those little pads of lava flow. So here's that bumpy area of pahoi flows that's flowing on top of that crust, and further over in this direction, there is that flatter, coherent crust all through there. So it looks like maybe it's trying to sag a little bit in here, and this is interesting because that's the pathway that goes to the that pond in the southeast, right? But as you can see, we now have that lava tube exposed all the way up here. It doesn't seem like any of this is getting it back over there anymore. And so even if this main pond resumes, it seems like the southeast pit era is likely over, at least significantly interrupted here from that. So that's what's happening on Kilauea. The USGS update still says no significant changes observed in the summit or either rift zone, and there's really nothing else that's really new to mention there. Really, the last thing, Dana, is just to mention what Dr. Hahn said, that Kilauea's got some interesting signals. We can dive into them a little bit more perhaps tomorrow. But overall, Kilauea is still swelling. Magma is still coming into it in those deeper areas, causing adjustments. And it's not quite clear what it might do, but it seems to be tilting and swelling. And because Maunaloa has sagged since it erupted, Kilauea is reclaiming some of that area in that direction, pushing more so towards Maunaloa now than it was more evenly before. Did I say that right?
Yeah, very interesting.
Dr. Hans, anything else?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the one interesting thing, the statement that stood out to me was the idea that for the volcanologist right now, Kilauea is the more interesting volcano. Maunaloa is kind of doing its typical Maunaloa eruption phase and doesn't really seem to be breaking expectations in a lot of ways. So Kilauea's reaction to it is more interesting. The nuance in academia, that's where they're looking right now.
Right. We know what Mauna Loa is doing, and we don't know what Kilauea is doing. It's simply, right?
Exactly.
It's obvious what Mauna Loa is doing. Everyone can tell that. And no one's exactly quite as sure what Kilauea is doing, right? We hear earthquakes in Mauna Loa in similar locations, still very low numbers. Here they are in Kilauea. I'm going to zoom way in. Not a huge amount of earthquakes as well, but there is this one that was at 3.6 at 0.1 kilometers depth, right around sea level. And this is the one that Ken mentioned had those longer period phases in it as well, right? That perhaps indicated something liquidy going on down in there. So very interesting to see this readjustment and reconfiguration of Kilauea underground. And he did mention there are no signals evident anywhere on the upper East Rift, the middle East Rift, or the lower East Rift. Did throw in a caveat that there do exist some deep connections that have been activated as recently as 2018. So since it's doing something a little bit funny, they want to make sure to cover all their bases, and you're keeping an eye on that possibility as well. But they are seeing no signals anywhere on that rift zone. So despite what's happening in Kilauea and Mauna Loa, Puna can carry on